some daughters learn to soothe their mother before they learn to soothe themselves. That kind of emotional training does not disappear with age. You noticed early when her face changed. You could feel disappointment, loneliness, or stress before she ever said a word. What looks like adult over-responsibility is often something older. It is a child's nervous system still scanning for a mother's emotional weather. Today, that pattern deserves clearer language. By the end, you may understand why care feels automatic and freedom feels strangely disloyal. The child, you will learn that closeness meant emotional duty, so your adult love often comes wrapped in vigilance, guilt, and exhaustion. You may be the person everyone calls mature, the dependable one, the one who can hold chaos without making it louder. But inside, your care is rarely peaceful. It is tense, anticipatory, and alert. Even kindness can feel like a job description. You answer messages quickly, over-explain boundaries, and notice tone shifts instantly. Small signs feel big because they once carried emotional consequences. At work, you manage moods before tasks. In relationships, you listen deeply, but struggle to reveal your own heavier feelings. Rest can feel earned only after everyone else feels okay. Otherwise, you mistake stillness for neglecting a responsibility. That is the hidden cost of becoming mom's emotional support. You did not just become caring, you became emotionally deputized. But there is an earlier layer underneath this. Many children are not asked directly. They simply learn that their mother feels better when they stay available. Maybe she called you her little best friend. Maybe she cried in front of you, confided in you, or leaned on you after conflict. Maybe your role was quieter than that. You became good, calm, and understanding because her life already felt too heavy. Children read emotional burden with astonishing accuracy. They do not need formal instructions. They adapt to the atmosphere and call it love. So you learned not only to love her, but to regulate her. Your presence became part comfort, part emotional insurance. That adaptation can look beautiful from the outside. People see empathy, patience, and emotional intelligence. They rarely see the fear underneath. Because fear is often what taught the skill. Fear of upsetting her, fear of adding stress, fear of becoming one more need. The role you played at home shaped what safety meant. Safety was not being held. Safety was being easy to hold. When a mother relies emotionally on her child, the child develops a confusing kind of pride. Being needed can feel like belonging. Picture a girl at the kitchen table after school. Her mother is quiet, wounded, and distant. The girl starts talking softly, trying to brighten the room. She is still a child, but she is already working, not with her hands, but with her sensitivity, timing, and emotional caution. This pattern started before words could explain it. She could not say, "I am managing my mother's loneliness." She only felt responsible. And when children feel responsible for adult pain, they often become adults who apologize for needing comfort. They associate need with danger and disruption. That is why help can feel embarrassing now. Not because you are incapable, but because dependence was never modeled as something safe and mutual. Your inner child still expects closeness to come with emotional labor, so support feels unfamiliar unless you are also providing something back. You might notice this when someone asks, "How are you really?" Your mind goes blank, then quickly shifts attention back to them. Freezing there is not a personality flaw. It is the old training. Your feelings once took second place to someone more fragile. What started as survival is now identity. You call yourself strong, but often mean you do not know how to fall apart safely. There is also grief inside this pattern, not only for what happened, but for what never happened around your childhood needs. You may have had a mother who loved you deeply. Love was present, but emotional direction was reversed in subtle, exhausting ways. And here's what most people miss. A child can feel loved and still become overburdened by a parent's emotional dependence. That is why this wound is hard to name. There may be no dramatic story, only years of being quietly recruited into adulthood. Children who become emotional anchors often grow into adults who feel guilty when they stop smiling, soothing, or staying available. You may sense it in ordinary moments. A delayed reply feels cruel. Saying no feels cold. Taking space feels like abandonment. The roots go further back than most realize. This is not just people-pleasing. It is loyalty shaped by early emotional enmeshment. Imagine an adult woman sitting in her car after work. She is drained, but before going home, she prepares herself to sound warm on the phone. Nothing terrible is happening. Still, her body braces. She expects someone else's feelings to become her evening assignment. Or imagine being asked for a small favor when you are already overwhelmed. Your mouth says yes while your chest quietly collapses. Later, resentment appears, but so does shame, because the child you were learned that love could be lost through emotional withdrawal. You may even struggle to know what you want before others speak. Their needs arrive first, and your inner world rearranges around them. If you have been recognizing yourself, share which part hit closest. Sometimes naming the pattern out loud is the first honest relief. Was it becoming the calm one too early? Was it feeling guilty for resting or freezing when someone asks what you need? Maybe it was the mother who leaned on you emotionally. Or maybe it was the softer version, where you simply learned her mood mattered most. If this is your story, you are not overreading the past. Children remember emotional roles even when the family never names them. And this matters because adult life keeps activating the same blueprint. The old role returns whenever someone nearby feels disappointed, fragile, or upset. So you become excellent in crisis and strangely lost in peace. Stability gives you less to do, and that can feel unnerving. The strangest part of this pattern is how invisible it looks. Competence hides pain very well, especially when it was rewarded early. You may seem selfless when you are actually hypervigilant. You may seem generous when you are afraid of the emotional consequences of not giving. Receiving kindness can also feel disorienting. Part of you softens, another part searches for the obligation hidden underneath the gift. That split is important. It reveals how early care got linked with emotional debt. Nothing felt simply given. Everything carried a mood. And there is often anger buried beneath the devotion. Not because you did not love her, but because childhood was crowded by her feelings. Many adults feel ashamed of that anger. They tell themselves she struggled, she did her best, she needed someone too. All of that may be true, but your compassion for her should not erase the cost to you. The child you were learned to monitor, soften, and absorb. That early adaptation became your adult difficulty with boundaries, rest, and honest needy. This is where your adult self meets your inner child, not in blame, but in a painful recognition of what was asked too soon. A child should be allowed to need without managing the room first. A child should not become the emotional container for a parent's loneliness. When that line blurs, identity blurs with it. You stop asking, "What do I feel?" and start asking, "What is needed from me?" Then adulthood becomes crowded with invisible labor. You anticipate reactions, prevent discomfort, and translate tension before anyone else notices it. Even intimacy can feel like work. You stay attuned, responsive, and careful, but true relaxation inside love remains difficult. And if someone is emotionally immature, the old chemistry can feel familiar, not healthy. Familiar. Your body recognizes the assignment. That is why some people repeat this pattern in friendships and relationships. They become the listener, stabilizer, and emotional translator again. The role feels meaningful at first. Then slowly, it becomes draining, lonely, and hard to leave without guilt. Because guilt was one of the earliest tools in this dynamic. Maybe nobody said it outright, but your body learned the language. If mom was hurt, you felt responsible. If she was lonely, you felt summoned. If she was true, you felt you had failed. That emotional equation does not vanish at 18. It follows you into texts, relationships, offices, and homes you build for yourself. This is when you start to understand yourself differently. Your exhaustion is not random. It is the cost of chronic emotional overfunctioning. There may also be a deep mistrust of your own anger. Anger threatens the role because the role depends on softness and availability. So instead of anger, you feel headaches, shut down, numbness, or sudden tears. The body speaks what the role never permitted aloud. You might say, "I'm just tired lately." But the tiredness has history. It often belongs to the child who carried too much sensitivity. And here's the most painful insight. Sometimes what looked like closeness was actually overexposure to a parent's unmet emotional needs. That does not mean every tender memory was false. It means tenderness may have been mixed with responsibility no child could process. So part of healing is grieving the version of closeness you thought you had, not because it was fake, but because it was uneven. The child you were may have felt special, chosen, or mature. Later, the adult you became feels burdened, cautious, and emotionally overextended. Children who are praised for being emotionally strong often become adults who feel guilty for becoming emotionally honest. That is the hidden exchange. What makes this harder to see is that your pain may not look dramatic. It may look like constant composure and private depletion. You get things done. You show up. You comfort others. Then you wonder why your own life feels strangely far away. That distance is not a lack of gratitude. It is what happens when selfhood grows around adaptation instead of full emotional permission. Still, this pattern is not your final shape. Awareness changes the relationship between the wound and the role. Healing here does not mean becoming cold. It means learning that care without self-erasure is still care. It means letting your mother's feelings belong to her again, even if part of you still rushes forward automatically. It means noticing the impulse to rescue before you obey it, not shaming it, just seeing it clearly enough to choose. It also means respecting the child inside you who earned love through emotional usefulness. That child deserves tenderness, not criticism. Your inner child still expects approval for being easy, wise, and available. But adulthood asks for something more honest than that. It asks whether your generosity includes you, whether your kindness reaches inward, whether your peace depends on managing someone else's pain. You're allowed to disappoint the role, even when you cannot yet fully disappoint the person. That distinction matters more than people realize. Sometimes healing begins with very small rebellions, a slower reply, a simpler no, a pause before soothing what is not yours. At first, those moments may feel cruel. Then gradually, they start to feel like oxygen returning to rooms that stayed closed too long. You may never tell the story in harsh language. You do not have to. Emotional truth does not need theatrical wording to be real. It is enough to say this: I was a child who became too responsible for my mother's inner life. That is already a powerful sentence. If this pattern lives in you, reflect on where it shows up most now. In dating, work, family calls, or the silence after conflict. What part of your adult life still feels organized around keeping someone else emotionally steady? That question can change what you notice this week. If you want, share in the comments which moment felt most familiar. The kitchen table, the guilt after boundaries, or the fear of needing help. And if Aven Psychology helps you name what your childhood quietly shaped, stay close. There is more here for the parts of you that adapted too early. Because understanding the wound is not self-indulgence. It is how you stop calling survival a personality. You were never born to be your mother's emotional shelter. You were a child, and that child deserved to be held without becoming the one who holds everything.